Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Okay, now let's welcome our main speaker for tonight, Tom.
Thank you, Nick. My name is Tom, and I'm an alcoholic. And what a good deal. Before I get into a stream of consciousness, I would like to thank Justin for flattering me and inviting me here to talk to the group tonight. It's really quite flattering and quite an honor. This is my home group, and geez, I know practically everybody here, which is pretty neat. I got sober, let's see, my sobriety date is September 14th, 1997. I was 39 years old and running out of steam. You know, I really like doing this. This is a lot of fun. I know a lot of people struggle when they get up here. George, that was a great talk that you gave, and it was quite a deal. I know my computer crashed one time, and George is quite computer literate and competent, and he came over and bailed me out one afternoon and spent 2 or 3 hours trying to get my computer back online. So I really do appreciate that, and you're really of service to the people in the fellowship. I know that from my own experience. So, but I like doing this. I like running off at the mouth, and I don't know if I'll say anything of value. That remains to be seen. Hopefully, I'll say something tonight that I need to hear. That would be good. But like I say, my sobriety date, I got sober in 97, and it's kind of funny. I showed up here. You know, I'd been here a gazillion times. You know, I think that I pretty much knew that I had a problem with alcohol when I was about 19 years old. I knew, because I tried to stop drinking and couldn't, and I did not know that. I didn't know the magnitude of my alcoholic problem. I didn't know that that I'd gone beyond the point where that I could stop on my own. And it's funny, I was in a meeting earlier today, and we were reading chapter 3. The first 3 chapters of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous focus on the first step. And it talks about young people, a lot of young people today in Alcoholics Anonymous, and how if they decided to drink, if they really had a compelling reason to stop drinking at a young age, they could, because I think the push of Alcoholics Anonymous, the people that wrote the book and their experience was that alcoholism is a progressive disease. But they point out in that chapter that who the heck would want to stop drinking? You know, if it does for us what it does. You know, so, but I know at 19 I knew I had a big problem, and but I didn't know that I was powerless over alcohol. I'd lost the ability to make a rational decision as to alcohol. You know, I couldn't stop drinking. But anyway, I was an angry little boy when I was a kid. Caused a lot of grief and damage to my family, and got booted out of every school I ever went to, and then I was a big kid in a young man's body, and started getting fired from every job that I got involved with, and got arrested a lot. And at 39 years old, I kind of had a moment of clarity. I was living in a little apartment that I live in today, and I was getting it cleaned up a little bit, and the dents taken out of my car, and I had a kind of a moment of clarity where I had stepped out, and I looked around me, and I just couldn't believe that that the way I'd lived like for so long, I had a moment where I looked up in the sky, and I said to myself, I'm spitting in the face of God if I think I can go on living like this. And I stumbled down here to the Marina Center one more time, in September, and but this time I guess I was just a little bit more desperate and just a little bit more fed up and out of gas, and I just started hearing stuff, you know. And if you're new and you wonder why we do what we do here in Alcoholics Anonymous, we read Chapter 5 in just about every meeting here in Southern California, in this area, in this room. The reason we do that is for guys like me that have come to Alcoholics Anonymous for years and just never heard it. Just never heard a thing, you know. I didn't hear anything in Chapter 5, and I didn't hear these ideas of getting a commitment and getting involved and sticking your hand out and meeting people. And for some reason that or another that don't know why that happened, I started hearing that, you know, and started coming to meetings every day. And but man, I was coming apart at the seams. I'm a stumble in off the street alcoholic. I wasn't even really completely aware of the network of hospitals and treatment centers that they have today. Although when I was 22 years old, I had a bunch of, I'd gotten arrested 3 or 4 times in a row. And I guess I was kind of an angry guy, and I got in some sort of conflict with the public defender's office down in West Los Angeles, and they didn't want to represent me. So they gave me a state-appointed attorney who was a Roger Potash. You know, he's a real sharp guy, and he was real familiar with guys like me. You know, I don't know today if he was in the program or not, but you know what? It wouldn't surprise me because he saw right through me, and he gave me the opportunity to go to a program. They call it the Phoenix House down on Venice Beach now, but at the time it was called Tuam Est, and it was run by the people who had left Synanon, and you know, a lot of people are familiar here, especially that are native Californians, with Charles Diedrich and Synanon and that whole movement at the time. Well, that organization broke up, and a lot of the people that were involved there started this treatment program called Tuam Est. And in lieu of going to LA County Jail, I went to Tuam Est. And but I was just 22 years old, and you know, I was kind of a budding alcoholic. I'd only been drinking for maybe 8 or 10 years at that time, and it was a 2-year commitment at that program. And I remember there was an interview. They wouldn't let us go anywhere by ourselves. They had what was called strength. And so whenever we went anywhere, we'd go with somebody. And this poor guy had been in the program about a year, 18 months or whatever. You know, he was like, you know, had been through the mill there. And he took me down to talk to my, for a probation interview. To see whether or not they were going to allow me to do this diversion, I guess is the term for it today. And we were in the office, and I remember we were talking, and this poor guy was like so fidgety and nervous, the guy interviewing me. And my strength guy was all dressed nicely, you know, in a suit, and I was just kind of a wreck and young guy, you know, just punk. And they were asking me, you know, do you drink? And I said, well, yeah, I drink. And he said, well, do you use cocaine? And well, yeah, a little bit. And he goes, well, do you smoke marijuana? And I go, yeah, you know. And he said, do you take peels? And I thought, peels? You know, what the heck is this guy, peels? You know, I couldn't understand what the hell he was talking about. And pills, oh, pills. I started laughing so hard, man. I just, F it, you know, I didn't care, you know, I mean, this was just a joke, you know. I mean, I didn't know, I had no clue, you know. It amazes me today, you know, what little life skills that I had and how totally unaware and oblivious I was to any structure or anything. And so I just started laughing hysterically, and the poor guy I was with was just like, he started laughing, you know, and the poor guy interviewing me, it was just like absolutely ridiculous, and I just didn't give a darn. You know, I didn't care what the heck was going to happen to me or where I was going to go or anything. So, but anyway, they allowed me to go into the program. And the one thing that I recall from that experience was I was walking down the boardwalk one day with a group of us guys, and of course I fell in with all the belligerent, angry, like nonconformists, you know. And we would sneak out, and you know, you weren't allowed to use sugar, coffee, or any of this stuff. I think they'd given up the shave your head deal, you know. We didn't do that, you know. But they did. They were really, really strict, and we'd run out and like, you know, bum money and go to the pier and eat cotton candy, you know, and ride the rides. You know, we're in our mid-20s, like a bunch of kids, you know, just totally out of control. And but I remember walking down the boardwalk. I hadn't had a drink or a drug in like about 3 or 4 months, and I felt so good. I thought, wow, why would I ever drink or drug again? This is just dynamite. But after 6 months, I had a 6-month commitment to that program. And so when I hit 6 months, and they'd shipped us up to this little town called Turlock, up in the San Joaquin Valley. It was a little what's the name of that town? Anyway, there's another major town off the 99. It's a little north of Fresno too, but that's close. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, not Merced. I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, it's this tiny little town, and it was funny to generate money for the program. They'd get us up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and we'd go out to this farm, and with a bag lunch, and we get there, and the farmer would put us in the back of his little wagon with a tractor, and he'd drive us out in the middle of this orchard, and there were like it was an almond orchard, but the trees it takes like 5 years for an almond tree to grow to maturity to produce almonds. So in the interim, they would plant watermelon vines in between the almond orchard, and they'd hand us a hoe and a file and a bag lunch, and we'd be out there for like 10 or 12 hours, all these just newcomer alcoholic misfits, and we're supposed to whack out the vines, and we'd get talking, and we'd like whack out too many vines, and the farmer would just go haywire, because this is a business he's trying to run. And it was like the hardest work I've ever done, and I've done all like really difficult work in my life, but I tell you, working on a farm is real tough, stoop labor. But so when my 6-month commitment was over, I'm like, I'm out of here. And I demanded that they gave me a Greyhound bus ticket, because they'd always say, it's fine, if you want to leave, there's the door. I'm sitting there going, yeah, buddy, when I hit my 6 months, I'm gone. So I did that. I got my bus ticket, and I ended up in West Hollywood, and with a bunch of guys that had left the program down here. And I ended up in a 1-bedroom apartment in West Hollywood, North Hollywood. And with this old guy and the 3 of us, and whoever came home the drunkest, the latest, slept on the floor. And that was okay with me. I was 22, 23 years old, and had no direction or moral compass or future or anything. And I pretty much spent the years between my 20s and 30s as kind of a predator, just hunting down people and victimizing them. And that's just the way I lived for a long time. And getting fired from this job and that job and the other job. And when I got here, I came to terms with the idea that I didn't know, there was no reason or idea why I did the things that I did. I thought that it was just random. I was alcoholic, and there was just no explanation. And recently I've come to terms with the reality that the reason I was doing the things that I was because I was just profoundly immature and angry and full of resentment, and hadn't grown up. And so my years in Alcoholics Anonymous have been about growing up and being more accountable for who I am and the direction and course of my life. So, and it's been painful, but it was funny because when I was new, it was pretty amazing. Like I say, I was befriended by this gal Stephanie Clark, who was she was 5 years sober at the time, and she when I had 13 days, and I was just coming apart at the seams, and I went. And I was just absolutely losing my mind. And I knew some people, but I didn't have any commitments or anything. I don't think I had a sponsor yet. And I smoked some pot. And I got so stoned. I hadn't taken a drug or a drink or anything in 13 days. Man, I thought I dropped acid or something. I was so loaded. I was like, whoa. But I had connected enough already in the rooms that there was a meeting that I wanted to go to in Chase Park over here in the Marina that somebody told me about here. And I was so stoned. I knew that you guys wouldn't care, but I was just too stoned and paranoid to go to the meeting. And I was so bummed, and I came so close to drinking that night, but I didn't drink. And I came back here the next day, and this gal, Stephanie, told me, oh, I guess you have a new sobriety date. And I said, no, I don't. And she said, yeah, you do. And I was like, what? I just didn't get it. I was in that alcoholic cloud. I just didn't get it, and I got a new sobriety date, and that was September 14th. And I got a sponsor. I became alarmed, more desperate, and I got a sponsor. And he gave me a couple of directions, to get a couple of commitments. And those 2 commitments, little jobs in Alcoholics Anonymous, if you're new and you hear that expression, a commitment. I started, I think I was a greeter, and I got a treasury commitment. I was collecting the money and counting it at the meetings. And those 2 commitments turned into 6 commitments. And I know today when they say that, the newcomer is the most important person in the room, the reason we're the most important person in the room is because we're doing all the work. I had all the commitments. I thought if I drank, the whole place would shut down. I was selling the books and greeting people at the door and collecting the money, and I was really involved in this thing, and I had an experience with the steps, and my first sponsor was perfect for me because my second sponsor. My first sponsor had to let me go. He had a lot on his plate. I didn't know that at the time, but I know that now. And my second sponsor was terrific because I liked to bicycle ride, and he did, and him and his wife are very connected in the program, and they were into conventions, and there are a lot of activities to do in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they did those things, and I showed up and went to the South Bay Roundup and all the conventions, and I got involved with a couple different hiking groups, and man, the first year of my sobriety was the greatest year of my life. It was such an incredible shift for me, and I really appreciate what Gordon, what you said. Congratulations on 2 years, and Linda, because it's just such a big deal getting sober. And I think up until this point in my sobriety, between 7 and 8, has been the second most profound experience in my sobriety. And I'm so grateful that I hung around long enough to experience another transformation in my life. It's funny, when I was new, I heard a couple of things, and I don't know why these struck me, but I was amazed that I'd never seen people, I'm 47 now, but people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s who enjoyed life so much. Because my parents, and I just didn't see a lot of that, and the other people around me, I just didn't see, people really enjoying the experience of life. And I saw that here in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. The second thing that I noticed was I saw people who were sober a while, and that had difficulties sober, and were able to come back to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and recreate their life. And I understand today why that struck me, because I'm in the process now at 8 years sober doing that in my life, recreating my life and choosing a new direction. And it's just amazing to have the opportunity to do that. And it's quite an adventure. But sheesh. Man, it's funny. It's been a while since I've had a chance to speak in a meeting. It's funny, I went to a lot of step study meetings, and oftentimes I do better when, or I'm more comfortable or have more fun when we focus on a particular step and or tradition. I mean, it's been a while since I've done a long talk like this, but it's. Bob reassured me that if I run out of gas, I can quit early. Oh, it's very encouraging of him. I appreciate that. It's funny. My beautiful girlfriend Jean's here tonight. It's just fun that she made it down here, and her friend Joni. It's really great that you guys came down this evening to support me. I appreciate that. And it was funny because I was talking to Aiden. Aiden, are you still here? Aiden, at the front door in the beginning of the meeting, we were talking about sugar was our first drug. It's funny, because when I was a couple days before I took my 9-month chip, I managed to stop smoking. And it was funny because I talked to a couple of people And they said, oh, don't try that in your first year, ooh, don't make any more changes. And I thought, oh, that's nice. I didn't argue with them, but I knew that, I had tried, I think on New Year's, my first sober New Year's, I tried to stop smoking, and I caught the flu, and I couldn't go out, and I was sick as a dog, and I thought, God, and I was still trying to, try to smoke, It was crazy. Oh, it's so awful. I remember when I was new, that's what I did, man. The greatest, it was nirvana. I would lean against the wall. It was like in early '98, we had that El Nino where we had all that rain, and man, it's just pouring rain, and in back of the Marina Center, the parking lot would flood. We called it Lake Serenity back there, and it filled up so much that you could barely stand against the wall and the back wall back there, and we'd stand back there, with a cigarette in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other, and I just thought, God, it's great being sober, which I was, but I swear to God, man, I thought if I drank another cup of coffee, I was going to have a couple of Budweisers just to come down. I was just so wired. I couldn't sleep. God, I wonder why I can't sleep at night. And I wonder if it has anything to do with the 20 cups of coffee I drink. And so when I was 9 months, I stopped smoking, man. And it's just a miracle that I was able to let that go. And I mentioned Aiden because we were talking about sugar, and he was talking about when he was a kid, that was the first drug. And he actually got arrested at 13 years old. He was here. I'm going to tell his story. My story's boring. But no, he was talking about when he was 13, he got arrested for stealing money to buy candy. And I thought, oh, yeah, we used to go to the Santa Glen drugstore up on Beverly Glen and Santa Monica Boulevard when the trestle was still there and the railroad tracks were in there. And we used to go in there and steal jelly beans and candy and bags of candy. And we didn't steal enough just to fix, to get our high. And we had to steal way more than we needed. It's kind of a very alcoholic. And that was the first drug. And so I have had an opportunity sober here. In April, I'll be 3 years off of refined sugar. And I'm not as strict as I am with, my alcoholism, but, it's a big deal. And the reason I mentioned that, this is an AA meeting, and why are you talking about smoking? This is because, I think my sober life is more than just not drinking. It's about my physical health. As a matter of fact, with me, the priorities when I'm living right and I'm conscious and aware of what I'm doing, like Gordon was talking about, when I'm aware, my sobriety is first, my health to me is second, my work is third, and my personal relationships are fourth. Because unless I prioritize my life like that, I can't show up for a relationship. I have to be sober, I have to be healthy, and I have to be self-supporting through my own contributions in order to have something to offer in a relationship. So it's just incredibly important to have those priorities in my life. So, and that's why I'm talking about these issues, and the sugar and the cigarette, and all that stuff. But if you're new, smoke them if you got them, because I sure did, and it's just amazing, it's so easy, when we get down the road, to throw stones at the past, at the past. And I try not to do that, because I'm so grateful, I forget where the heck I come from, I'm an alcoholic who, among a lot of the stupid things that I did along the path as an alcoholic is I got addicted to narcotics. And I guess it was in '87, my ganja connection was out of the country. And, I always had connections who were not addicts. They were businessmen, When I tried to sell dope, we used to run up to Humboldt County and Mendocino counties and Spy Rock Road, off the Highway 1. We'd drive 15 miles up into the mountains, and we knew the guys that had the guerrilla farms, and in the redwoods, and they'd have 4 or 5 plants here and 3 or 4 plants there and 6 or 7 plants there, and they'd cross the indica and the sativa, and they'd have these big Christmas trees blowing in the wind, and we'd haul the ganja out of the hills, and I'd come home and I'd end up in the hole. How do you do that? A little Volkswagen Squareback with all this weed in the trunk, I remember I got pulled over in some little town, and back in the day, you could smell this stuff 20 feet from the car. I'm sitting, and I got roaches in the ashtray, and the nice highway patrolman just goes, well, here's your ticket, sign here, bye. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, And I'd come down with all this weed, and I'd lose money, because I'm an addict or an alcoholic and not a businessman. But anyway, my ganja connection at the time was a businessman, and he lived well, and he was out of the country, and I stumbled down into the hood and was looking for a little marijuana, and somebody dropped a rock in my hand, and I got addicted to crack cocaine and smoked it what seemed like every day for 10 years. And it was not fun. It was really inconvenient. And I was already quite an accomplished thief, but man, that addiction, I stole everything that wasn't tied down, and everything, it's just a hard way to live, real hard way to live. And, all the trips in the middle of the night. It was funny, there was a gal that was talking this morning, and she talked about really a wonderful talk, Dominique. I watched her sister get sober, Leonora, and she's like 7 now, and her sister's 2.5. And she talked about, being in the car and just driving around L.A., for hours. And I totally related to that, because I'd cop, and, it was so ridiculous. I'd go down to this neighborhood and it was hot, and I'd look through the apartment buildings and I'd go, oh, there are the boys in the black and white. It'll be about 4.5 seconds before they're around the corner. Let me cop. When it was too hot, you'd go to another neighborhood and terrorize that neighborhood. It was funny. I was just talking to Gene the other day about how, it's like, well, that's a bad neighborhood. I thought, well, you know what? If there weren't guys like me going down to cop dope, it probably wouldn't be a bad neighborhood. Duh, that's why it's a bad neighborhood, because guys like me are going down there cop doping. The guys I used to cop dope from didn't smoke that dope. They'd ask me if it was any good because they were businessmen. It's a business down there, or wherever. It was a brutal addiction, and I got here, and I knew one thing I knew when I got here was that I was an all or nothing guy, because it was like a shell game. I'd stop the cocaine, and then I'd drink whiskey like water. And then I wouldn't drink, and I'd be smoking ganja like a chimney, and it was like a shell game. And I knew that. That's one thing I knew for sure, that it was all or nothing when I got here. There was no way I was going to be able to chip. No way. And, it got so bad for me that it's amazing, this idea of managing. I used to have a stack of pawns. There's certain stuff I wouldn't let go, and I had a stack of pawn slips on my coffee table, and I have to go through them regularly. What am I going to lose this time? Or, what did I steal that I can turn over? And then they changed the gun laws. Handguns are always good for a couple $100, but they changed the laws. And I knew the pawn dealers. I knew his name, his wife's name, his son's name, his dog's name, his helper's name. And I walked in there and go, well, Mr. Cook, they've changed the laws, and if you pawn this .357 Magnum, I'm not going to be able to give it back to you if you're a felon. And, oh, thank you very much. Can't go without the handgun. They might come and get me. Them. I remember I was in just a total gonzo out to La La Land at like 10:30 in the morning. It got so bad for me I couldn't. Guys, this turned into an NA meeting. I'm sorry about that. But it got so bad for me I couldn't cop in the and it passed 10 o'clock in the morning because it was just too crazy and dangerous for me. And I came to one time standing in my apartment with the hammer pulled back on my .357 Magnum, and I looked down and I couldn't even believe I had a gun in my hand. I could have blown my damn foot off, And it was just crazy, crazy living like that. And so anyway, it's just such a miracle that I stumbled down here, and it's still beyond me, because I've had a lot of guys, real difficult guys like me, that I've gotten real close to in Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I was all cooped up in my little apartment, drinking myself to death and doing whatever I was doing, I had no idea how lethal this alcoholism was and how many people died. And I've seen a lot of people die. I've seen people die right in front of me. I've seen guys that were so desperate, tears in their eyes, and they'd ask. A guy just the other day, I was talking to him on the phone, and he has this idea that somehow his problem is so much more difficult and desperate than anybody else. And he even says that he talked to somebody the other day in a meeting and they agreed that nobody has been strung out on so many pills and alcohol than him. Wow. And that sort of attitude I was trying to tell him is just lethal. And I told him, why don't you buy your mother some flowers? It was just like bing right off the top of his head. Why don't you ask your father what you can do around the house? How can you help do something? Bing right off his head. Why don't you go to a meeting? Or, and it's amazing how unwilling. I had a guy asked him one time to get 2 commitments, and a week, and he said get 1 commitment every 2 weeks, and it's just bing, And I don't say that as a judgment thing. The reason I say that is because I'm astonished. Why is it that I was willing to do that? Why is it that I was willing to go to a meeting every single day for 740 days in a row over 2 years? Why is it that I ended up with 6 commitments? Why is it that I did my first 5th step when I was 5 months sober? Why is it that I made these amends early in my sobriety? I remember my mother, I think it was her 76th birthday, and her and my aunt, who has since passed, who was an alcoholic, we got them both in wheelchairs, me and my oldest sister. I had no relationship with my sister, any of my family members. I fell off the map and didn't see anybody in my family for about 8 years, 8 or 10 years. And when I got sober, I reconnected. Well, late in my alcoholism, I became so pathetic and so unemployable that any money that I made went all towards my alcoholism and drug addiction. So I came back to the family to see if I could what I could sponge and what I could get from them, So that's why I reconnected initially. But then I ended up getting sober, and I reconnected with my sister. And me and my sister took my mother and my aunt up to the Getty Center when they opened. And we had them both in wheelchairs, and we were wheeling them around the Getty Center, and as a birthday present to my mother. And, made a lot of other amends. And, why is it that I did that? I don't know why that is. And some of us do and some of us don't. It's a program of action. And, I know that Alcoholics Anonymous in a nutshell is, we take an action which yields an experience that we share with another alcoholic. And you folks did that for me and showed me that, and then I did that, and my life changed. And it's just amazing how that happened. I'm astonished, and it continues to change. And I continue to stay in action. It was funny earlier. I was reading in the book about the car salesman who Jim, I think, on page 34. Is it? If you're new, you can check that page 34, and it talks about how he got it that he was alcoholic, and that he had made a start in Alcoholics Anonymous, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life, and he drank again. And I see that freight train coming at 8 years sober. And so I've made my new sponsor, I have a third sponsor, he tells me things like, make sponsoring men a priority. Don't spend money you don't have. Save money. He really gets my goat. I was talking to him, why am I here at this station in life at 8 years sober? Maybe you're lazy. I didn't want to hear that. I'm a truck driver. I was an interstate truck driver for a lot of years, and I know how to work with my hands, but it takes a lot of effort and discipline to study. I'm going to school now. I'm going to enroll in another class in February, and it takes discipline and it takes maturity. One thing that I didn't realize when I got here was that in my inventory, I used to tell people that I'd gotten fired from every job that I've ever had. And the reality at 8 years sober, I finally realized that I didn't get fired from those jobs. I was immature and impatient and undisciplined, and I would do something, I'd have a tantrum, or I'd get violent, and I'd cause an issue at work where they had to let me go. And in a lot of those situations, they may not have had to let me go. I was convinced in my mind that what I did was so bad that they wouldn't have me, and I'd move on, because that's what I do. I move on. I don't know how to stay committed. I don't know how to keep my eye on the ball. I don't know how to show up. And that's just I'm trying to stay out of the judgment from that because it's just where I've arrived and it's how I see myself. And it's taken me a while in sobriety to see that, and I'm grateful that I see that. I may have never seen that truth. I have a friend, Herb, in the South Bay who says, the truth will set you free. There's a good possibility it may piss you off first. And, that truth pisses me off. And, but there's a lot of freedom in being accountable and seeing myself. And, it's pretty amazing. I'm really a lucky guy. It's amazing that from where I come from to still be in the ball game. There's a guy, another guy in the South Bay, Clancy, not the Clancy, but Clancy O'Hara. A lot of people have heard him talk, and he's so funny the way he talks about God, like he's a big blackjack dealer in the sky, and he deals out cards. And some days you get good cards, and some days you get bad cards. And but if I drink, I'm not even at the table anymore. And I know that, and I'm still at the table. I'm still showing up, and I'm still doing the deal, and I'm still learning, and it's just a miracle. I'm so lucky. Susie was here a little earlier. Is Susie still here? Susie got her driver's license. It's seems like a non sequitur, but it isn't. Susie recently got. I think she has 60 days. My God. And she got her driver's license a few days ago. Can you believe that? I wish she was here. We'd give her a damn hand, she got her driver's license back, It's just amazing to see that. It's such a big deal. I remember, I'm able to share that because I lost my license. And one of the things I did when I got here was that, I didn't want to be a truck driver anymore, but I'd lost my license, and my commercial license, and one of the things I did was I got that back. And when I got it back, I said, I'm never going to drive a truck ever again. And I actually got a real estate license, and I tried to be a real estate salesman, and it almost killed me. And it's so funny because now I see how ridiculous that was. I had no track record of showing up or it was an absurd idea for me to try to do that. And but I tried, and I learned. I think the greatest lesson that I learned from that experience was I learned how to fail and not drink. It's funny because the guy who was sponsoring me at the time said, "You didn't fail," and he was trying to make me feel good, and tell me something to somehow. No, I failed, and it was so ridiculous. The things that I did were so embarrassing that I don't even want to tell you what they were. Talk to me after the meeting. But it was so absurd. The decisions and the things that I was doing, were just completely ridiculous. And I admit that now, and I see it now. And it was grandiose, and it was immature. And I've regrouped, and really the only thing that's kept my head above water has been driving a truck. And I have a really good union truck driving job now that I'm going to get up at 3:30 tomorrow morning to go to. And there are times that, I want to drive that. It was funny. Earlier in the year, I was so distraught over the state of my life that I told my sponsor that I wanted to drive. I was up in Griffith Park. We delivered this heavy machinery and all this crazy stuff, 40,000 pound machines. And I was up at the top of Griffith Park. There's a helicopter heliport up there. We're hauling these big booms, for the movie industry, and I was up there, these hills and these big trucks, it would make a mountain goat nervous, it's really pretty insane. And I told him I wanted to drive that truck off the cliff and just kill myself, and he laughed. He goes, "Boy, that'd be great. If you're gonna go out big, he allows me to wallow, and he laughs, and it was so funny, because I have so many character defects, and I was having such a hard time, and he told me, what, Tom, we're so imperfect. And I was thanking him for pointing out the imperfections that I have, because he does it in a very loving way. And I laughed, and he said, what, Tom, we are so imperfect, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. It's just so easy to see through us. And it's funny, because I have this wonderful guy that I sponsor now, this one guy, Robert. And, I've shared a lot of, unfortunately, it's so awful, stuff just comes out, what's going on with me. And obviously we're talking about what's going on with him. And, more and more he's seeing me. And he realizes I'm a little wacky, Hello? And I was kidding him with him earlier today. I go, you know what, Robert? I go, no matter how wacky I am, I can still see you better than you can see yourself. And he laughed, because to a great degree, that's the way it works here in Alcoholics Anonymous. We can see each other better than we can see ourselves. My sponsor says the eye cannot see itself, And my sponsor has a very loving way of allowing me to see myself. And there's so much power and freedom and relief in that. I can put my finger on the problem, And to a lot of degree, it's with the first step, I'm powerless over alcohol, my life is unmanageable. Well, that's the problem. That is the problem. It's not the solution. The solution is in coming to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity, and to turn my will, my mind, and my thinking, and my life, my actions, my feet, over to the care of God as I understand God, the Great Spirit, the mystery of the universe. That's the beginning of the solution. And I was fortunate because I did a 4-step in the my first year, and a 5th step, and made amends, and that's the solution. And helping another alcoholic. I don't want to be like Jim, the car salesman, and not enlarge my spiritual life. I need to move forward and be a service, and connect with the other men in Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you're new and people are coming up to you and saying, do you have a sponsor? Do you have any commitments? Just give them a break. Get a cup of coffee. Have a donut or a cookie, because chances are good that those are just the things that they did, here in Alcoholics Anonymous. It just brought them more peace and happiness than they've ever known in their life, and they just want that for you. So, thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.